Number 3, establish a federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions. A federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions. That's not a bad thing, but it doesn't go far enough. So once the feds collect all these police brutality reports, what are you all going to do with the reports? Just because you're collecting data on police brutality, just because you're collecting data on police misconduct, doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it. So I'm going to give that a 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, I haven't given anything a 5 or greater yet. Let's continue. Enhance accountability for police officers who commit misconduct by restricting the application of qualified immunity doctrine for local and state officers, and by changing the intent element of the federal criminal offense of deprivation of rights under color of law, which has been used to prosecute police for misconduct, from willfully to knowingly or with reckless disregard. Okay, let me read this again. Enhance the accountability for police officers who commit misconduct by restricting the application of qualified immunity doctrine for local and state officers, and by changing the intent element of federal criminal offenses, which has been used to prosecute police, from willfully to knowingly or with reckless disregard. So here's what they're saying, brothers and sisters. Police are protected from something known as qualified immunity. It is a legal principle that grants government officials performing discretionary functions immunity from civil suit unless the plaintiff can show that the police officer violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. So qualified immunity is the statute that makes it difficult for police to be held accountable, brothers and sisters. But so they're saying downgrade the standard of proof from willfully, right? Officer Derek Chauvin, did he willfully choke out our brother George Floyd? Rest in peace. Or did he knowingly or with reckless disregard do it? So they want to move the standard of burden down from willfully, which is a very high burden. You got to prove that the police officer willfully did this. So they're saying downgrade it from willfully to knowingly or with reckless disregard. Okay? So I like that part, but it doesn't go far enough, because in my opinion, why are we restricting the application of qualified immunity instead of eliminating qualified immunity? Why are we restricting qualified immunity instead of eliminating qualified immunity? I don't want to restrict qualified immunity because that still gives the prosecutor discretion. It still gives the judge discretion. It still gives the system discretion. I don't want to restrict qualified immunity. I want to get rid of it. Okay? But I will give y'all a 5 on that. I'm going to give you a 5 on the qualified immunity provision. Let's go to the next one. I'm reading the provisions of the George Floyd Police Accountability Act. Although the Emmett Till Anti-lynching Bill was approved today due to my influence over the past weekend, we don't have the language of that law yet. So instead, I'm going over the language of the George Floyd Police Accountability Bill. So the next provision says require federal police officers to have body-worn cameras. Okay. That's not enough. Police are already wearing cameras. They're killing us with the cameras on. So yes, make the federal police wear a camera, but that's not enough because they're killing us even with the cameras playing. They're turning the cameras off. How about automatic prosecution of any police officer who turns off his camera while in the line of duty? We're going to call it obstruction of justice. Any police officer that turns off their camera in the line of duty, especially when dealing with black people, will be charged with obstruction of justice and will be fired from their job. That's what we want. That's what we want. If you turn off the body cam, you will be fired. You cannot be rehired by any other police force. That's another important point, brothers and sisters. That's another important point, brothers and sisters. That's another important point, brothers and sisters, because these police get fired from one state, go to another. These police get fired from one police district, go to another. These police get fired from one county and they go to another county. So it's not enough, you understand, to fire them. You must make it illegal and impossible for the racist cop to be hired anywhere else. Being fired from one district, being fired from one police precinct is the same as being fired from all police precincts. Being fired from one police precinct is the same as being fired from all police precincts. Being fired from one police precinct is the same as being fired from all police precincts. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And turn off that body cam, automatically charged with obstruction of justice. Your ass goes to jail. Turn off the body cam and you're automatically charged with felonious obstruction of justice. We must do that. I'm going to get attitude. That's kind of weak. Next, require federal police vehicles to be equipped with dashboard cameras. There we go again. Next, require state and local law enforcement agencies that receive federal funding to ensure the use of body-worn and dashboard cameras. Restrict the transfer of military equipment to the police. Restrict the transfer of military equipment to the police. Now this right here we go again with that word restrict. Here we go again with that word restrict. How about eliminate the transfer of military equipment to the police? How about eliminate the transfer of military equipment to the police? But here's my point. They're not going to do that because inner city police in the black community already have an abundance of military grade weapons and equipment. The police in the black community already have an abundance of military grade weapons and equipment. So there's even if they stopped, they already have enough of that because they've been getting it since Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1968, passed the Federal Police Assistance Act. So they've been getting equipment from the police since Dr. King's murder. So talking about you going to restrict it is nonsense. Eliminate it. Say no more military equipment to be sent to police districts in the black community. So I'm going to give you a 0 on that because you're not being honest. Next, requires state and local law enforcement agencies to adopt anti-discrimination policies and training programs, including those targeted at fighting racial profiling. Wait a minute now. Let me read this again because I got a problem with this. Requires state and local law enforcement agencies that receive federal funding to adopt anti-discrimination policies and training programs, including those targeted at fighting racial profiling. I have a problem with this. Do y'all want to know why I have a problem with this? The reason I have a problem with this, brothers and sisters, why is it not illegal for the police to not have anti-discrimination policies and training programs? Isn't that required under the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law? So you're telling me that the police do not already have anti-discrimination policies and training programs? You're just now making that a requirement in 2022? That's not acceptable. That is not acceptable. Or are you just regurgitating something that already exists because you can't think of enough nonsense to fluff up this bill? Because if you're telling me you're just now requiring anti-discrimination policies in the police district, I can't respect that. I can't respect that. Next, prohibit federal police officers from using chokehold or other carotid holds, which led to the death of Eric Garner, and requires state and local law enforcement agencies that receive federal funding to adopt the same prohibition. Why can't the chokehold be made illegal across the board for police in the United States? See, I don't like this conditionality. I don't like this conditionality. I don't like the conditionality of these provisions in the George Floyd anti-lynching bill. You're saying federal police, but you're not saying state and local. You're saying state and local, if they get the money, they have to adopt a no chokehold approach. But what I'm saying is whether they get federal money or not, the chokehold should be illegal, period. Why do you keep making it conditional? Why are you making these provisions conditional? You get a 0 on that. Next one. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants that allow police to conduct a raid without knocking or announcing themselves in federal drug investigations, and provide incentives to the states to enact a similar prohibition. Did y'all hear the tricknology in that? Did y'all hear the tricknology? I'm going to read it again, and I want you to listen to see if you can pick up the tricknology in what I just read. Listen to that. Look how they play with the words. Prohibit the issuance of no-knock warrants in federal drug investigations and provide incentives to the states to enact a similar prohibition. Here's the problem with that. Number one, why is it only for drug investigations? Why is it only for drug investigations? No-knock warrant should be no-knock warrant across the whole board. No-knock warrants should be made illegal, just like the chokehold, across the board. No-knock warrants should be made illegal across the board. Why are you only saying for the purposes of a drug investigation? That's number one. And then number two, You say provide incentives to the states to enact a similar prohibition. Why are the states not being required to eliminate no-knock warrants? Why are you providing incentives? The fact that you are providing an incentive means it's not mandatory. The fact that you are providing an incentive means that it's not mandatory. The fact that you are providing an incentive means that it is not mandatory, brothers and sisters. Do you understand that? This is weak as hell. I thought the George Floyd police bill eliminated no-knock warrants across the board, federal, state, and local police. I thought it eliminated it. This does not eliminate. This says only for drug investigations on the federal level, and we will try to convince the states to do the same thing by giving them incentives. We don't want no damn incentives. Eric Garner lost his life due to that, a chokehold. Amir Pope in Minnesota lost his life due to a no-knock warrant. Breonna Taylor lost her life due to a no-knock warrant. And you're talking about you're not going to eliminate them? Only on the federal level? But you're not going to make the states do it? That's zero. This bill is starting to smell like. This bill is starting to stink real bad. Congressional Black Caucus. Congressional Black Caucus. You tell Nancy Pelosi. You tell Nancy Pelosi this ain't it. Black America is not comfortable with this. Let me finish. We got two more. Changes the threshold. Amir Locke. Changes the threshold for the permissible use of force by federal law enforcement from reasonableness to only when necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. Changes the threshold for the permissible use of force by federal law enforcement officers from reasonableness to only when necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. That's not clear enough for me. The language is not clear enough for me. They're saying the threshold for the use of force by federal law enforcement officers is reasonableness. Was it reasonably justified? They want to change that to using force only when necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. That still leaves too much room for interpretation. That still leaves too much room for interpretation. And the last one, mandate that federal officers use deadly force only as a last resort, and that de-escalation be attempted, and condition federal funding to state and local law enforcement on the adoption of the same. Let me read that again. Mandate that federal officers use deadly force only as a last resort, and that de-escalation be attempted, and condition federal funding to state and local law enforcement on the adoption of the same. Here's the problem I have with that. Number one, why do you keep using this language that says if you get federal money, you must follow the rule? They should follow the rule whether they get money or not. We need these provisions to be universal. Federal, state, local, whether they get federal funds or not means nothing because we're talking about saving black life. So that's number one. So that's number one. And then in addition to that, why is deadly force already not requiring? Why doesn't the use of deadly force already? Why is it not already requiring de-escalation attempts and only being used as a last resort? Why are you requiring that now? They're saying they're going to require the use of deadly force as a last resort. They're saying they're going to require the use of deadly force as a last resort. I'm saying, why is it not already a last resort? So you're saying up until now, police can use deadly force whenever they feel like it? Are you saying up until now, police can use deadly force whenever they feel like it? Because this is saying mandated as a last resort. Why is it not already a last resort? Why is it not already a last resort? And why doesn't the law already require de-escalation procedures? That's whack. That's whack. That bill is weak. And that bill tells me, I hope the Emmett Till bill is not that weak. I hope when I read the Emmett Till bill, and I'm going to go over it with you, brothers and sisters. I'm going to go over it with you, brothers and sisters. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not as weak as the George Floyd bill. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not as weak as the George Floyd bill. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not as weak as the George Floyd bill. This is very weak. This is very weak. So Nancy Pelosi, this is the best thing you could come up with after the George Floyd protests for justice. The most comprehensive social protest in America since the Dr. King assassination protests and the 1967 riots that swept America. And this is the best you could come up with. You know why this is the best they can come up with? Because when we had the George Floyd protests for justice all across America, when we had the George Floyd protests for justice all across America, we integrated the march. We turned it into a multicultural movement. Mistake number one. Mistake number two, there was no identified leadership or representation. And number three, there were no clearly articulated demands. And because the George Floyd protests did not have no clearly articulated demands, and because the George Floyd protests did not have official leadership or representation, anybody who wanted to speak could speak. So there was no unity of message. There was no unity of message during the George Floyd protests. And lastly, we integrated the damn protests. So the protest was exploited by every other group for their own personal agenda. We still haven't learned to struggle by ourselves. And that's why this weak-ass George Floyd bill, I want to say, I don't care if it gets passed or not. That's what I want to say. I want to say I don't care if it gets passed or not, but I want to be responsible. The no-knock warrants, we can use that. But the problem is it's only on the federal level involving drug investigations. The elimination of the chokehold, we can use that. But it's only federal, and they'll give incentives to the state and local agencies as to whether or not they want to use it. So this is weak. I hope the Emmett Till bill is not this weak. Let me tell you what's missing. Police can be charged with hate crimes. Police can be charged with the lynching bill. Police can be charged with federal hate crimes. Police can be charged with federal lynching. Add that to this. Police are not protected if what they do is done out of hate or if what they do is done as a lynching. Add that to the bill. There are no police protections for hate crimes and for lynchings. Add that to the bill. I see nothing in here about increasing the amount of black police who come from the city that they are policing. I don't see anything in this bill about increasing the amount, not minorities, not people of color, not diversity. I see nothing about increasing the amount of black police who come from the cities that they are policing. I also don't see nothing in here about no hiring of non-African police who are ex-military, ex-mercenary, ex-hate group, added in their Congressional Black Caucus. Added in their Congressional Black Caucus. No non-Africans can work in a black community if they are military, ex-military, mercenary, or hate group. Make it a requirement. I also don't see nothing about a civilian review board. I don't see anything in there about that. And I don't see anything in here about eliminating the right of police to have their trials paid for by the people whose community they are terrorizing. Why are we paying police bills to defend them in court after they murdered Sandra Bland? Why are the people paying the police attorney fees after they killed Eric Garner and Tamir Rice? Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Amir Locke. Put it in there that when police are indicted, they must provide for their own criminal defense. If the Fraternal Order of Police wants to help them, they can help them, but they will not have their trial paid for by the people. They just kicked me off of Instagram. So for my Facebook family, I just want to say, I'm not happy with what I see in the George Floyd police bill. The Emmett Till bill, we're going to look at it and see what it says. I hope it's not as weak as the George Floyd bill. And we're going to see what happens. I'm dealing with a little cold right now. I wish I had some homemade chicken noodle soup. I'm dealing with a little cold right now. I wish I had some homemade chicken noodle soup. But if you want to be a part of the Bishop Turner National Independent Black Political Movement, if you want to run or if you want to help people win, if you want to run yourself or if you want to help people win, send me an email, btnibpm@yahoo.com, btnibpm@yahoo.com. If you need to reach me by text message, 215-989-9858, 215-989-9858, 215-989-9858. I need some TLC right now, some chicken noodle soup, some ginger, some tea. I need some TLC. This is the Prince of Pan-Africanism signing out. We must unite. We must stand together. We must organize. And most of all, we must fight. Good night, brothers and sisters. Peace and Pan-Africanism.